Hello and welcome to another chapter of a tome pulled right off the shelves at the heart of the Jakuls. As always, I'm your reliable host, Lothrin, and there's ever so much more data to relay, so let's get to it, shall we? Go grab a filling meal, settle into a cozy spot, and pay accurate attention to Fleet Part 52, The Toil. Vilivin lounged behind his fire. He'd had to light another at a different camp to cook up fish. Lightning had struck the lake earlier in the day, killing a number of the fish near the shore's edge. He was in the middle of a fish stew feast. After several days of scrounging for little to nothing, this was almost too plentiful to imagine. He'd have to move on soon, though. Even with all the fish he'd smoked today, Vilivin doubted there'd be that many left biting in a week or so. Plus there was the smell, and the predators, the calls of wild beasts moving ever closer to the area. He didn't want to stick around when those creatures got here. So thinking a little ahead, Vilivin had chosen to cook at a separate site than where he slept. He'd spent the rest of today securing his shelter with defensive spikes, and he'd built a door he could secure to a small builder he'd spent most of yesterday rolling up here. He'd tied it off with a sapling bark rope he'd fashioned in the way Vildar had described to him. Vilivin felt at peace, even though he was drained, with all of the effort he had to expend in so short a time. It was quiet here, a different sort of quiet. Sure, there were insects buzzing, and birds chirping, and the constant rolling storms, but none of it felt like noise. The rain was nice, especially when it wasn't falling directly on you. The animals were cool to watch as long as you weren't hungry, and even then they were better than constant clangs and bangs, and people shouting over the noise. It was better. So all it really took to make Vilivin happy was a wood and dirt wall, a warm fire, and a very full stomach. And that was that. He fell asleep for a little while. Howls of a distant unknown beast awakened him from his slumber. Vilivin reached for a weapon, suddenly very aware that he didn't have one. A small rock, barely large enough to fit in his palm, was all he could find in the dim light of the dying flame. The howls were not answered, and the throat that called them out didn't pierce the evening sky again. But the adrenaline that coursed hastily through all of his veins would not recede, and Vilivin was left completely awake and alert, aware of all the threats that likely surrounded him from every possible angle. Okay, first things first. He calmed himself. Vilivin got up and fed the fire from his indoor supply of wood, replenishing his stock from a pile of broken branches just outside his door. The fresh wood was only a little damp, but Vilivin made the decision to build some sort of cover for his firewood in the future. No telling how much it would rain tomorrow. After that, he searched his tiny abode for the few stones he'd gathered and began to scrape and hone the best of the bunch into a primitive blade. It took time, several hours of it, but he had that time, and it made him feel at least a little bit better to keep his mind focused on a task. Eventually, he got exhausted enough to curl up in his bed once more, his fears forgotten while he held the stone axe head in his hands. Vilivin jolted awake with a start. It was drizzling again outside, a common enough occurrence. He rushed to care for his fire, bringing it back to life. It was a close call. He'd slept rather late. It almost made him ill for a few tense minutes. So desperate was his need to keep the fire alive and running that it seemed connected to his very life force when it didn't. He checked his stores of dry wood, judging whether or not he could wait to go get more. But in the end he spent time outside in the bitter cold, getting a little too wet for his liking, hauling more fallen branches and breaking up stuff he'd carried there the day before. Vilivin warmed himself by the fire, setting up a fresh batch of branches to dry off within his shelter. And then he went back out and, setting up a raised shelf with 3 angled walls, almost a pyramid, to wick water away from his firewood. He took a stroll down to check on his other camp nearer to the lake, and there he spent more time making stew and filling his belly, hanging smoked fish high in a tree a ways off from the second camp, and setting up a nearby hollow in a fallen tree to offer him a bit of comfort during the long days. After another day of long stretches of quiet forest life, Vilivin retreated to his tiny cave home, toting an armload of small stones and decently straight branches that might be thick enough for what he wanted. Some of the branches he'd burn in the fire, others he'd use for more spikes, and maybe a few Vilivin would actually craft into tool handles. He worked into the first few dark hours of the night, not even pondering on the lack of rippling energy across the surface of his skin. There was too much to do, and all of it required his full attention. He fell asleep again, without the nightly howl of interruption, clutching a Stone Age axe as if it were the source of all possible sustenance, drifting off into the land of shifting desires and peaceful if confused images within his mind. And so it is, our time together has once more come to a close. I hope each and every one of you enjoyed the tale as much as I have the telling of it. As always, I've been your qualified host, Lothran, and this was Fleet Part 52, The Toil, another tale right from the heart of the Jakuls. And now, sadly, ever so sadly, we must once again part ways. Corvoth, guide them back along the proper path, back to the safety they know all too well.
Yes, sir, Lothran. Oh, I was a little scared when I heard that howl. Oh, no. Back to work, though. A pleasant greeting and a fond farewell to each and all. Please leave all your comments, questions, and kindnesses down below. Don't you let me catch a single one of you leaving any of that nasty, mean, or rude stuff, though. You keep all that nonsense to yourselves. Got it? Don't you do it. Don't you do it. I got my eye on you. Don't you do it. Not a single bit. None of it. You don't do it. Don't you do it. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to help us learn, spread, and grow. And don't forget that we strongly encourage each and every one of you to stay safe out there. See you again tomorrow for Fleet Part 53. I hope everything stays quiet and calm. That would be real nice. Good night and good luck. You'll need it. Bye-bye, everybody.